Welcome to Berry Lamberts podcast. I'm Dhruva Patel, the Client Relationship Manager, and I'm joined here today by Janet Raeburn, a solicitor in the Family Department. Today we're going to be talking about cohabitation, what it involves, what you need to look out for, and what it actually means. So, cohabitation is a relationship stage that everyone knows, yet very few people understand. Am I right, Janet?
Yes. So when we say cohabitation, in the legal world, what we mean is that you're in a relationship and living with someone, boyfriend or girlfriend. But the important point is that you're not married. You're not in a civil partnership. You're living together.
Right. So that applies to quite a lot of people.
And a growing number. So if you think a lot of our laws, how long ago they were written, people didn't live together when a lot of these laws are written. The number is growing. Every year on year, more people cohabit without marrying.
Right. Well, very relevant topic then.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So what does common law marriage mean? Is it the same thing?
It's not a thing. I don't know. I don't want to start straight away by saying you're wrong, but no. Common law marriage is a myth. We hear it commonly because in other countries, they do have setups where if you've lived together for so long or you've had children together, you gain rights or it takes on some sort of status. We don't have that here.
Right, okay. That's important.
Really, really important to understand that a lot of the laws that we're looking at that apply to you as a cohabitee would apply to you if you lived with a sibling or a friend. It's not particular to the fact you're in a relationship.
Wow. That's actually quite something.
So 1 year, 20 years, 30 years, it makes
irrelevant.
Yeah. You don't gain anything.
Right. So what do people need to do then to protect themselves? What do they need to consider?
What you need to consider is that when people set themselves up together, it can take a number of forms, whether you're buying a house together, you're moving in with someone that owns a house, mum and dad are putting in money. You can imagine how many different financial scenarios crop up when you're just living together. What I advise my clients is that consider getting an agreement or document in place that provides some sort of financial certainty and security. We call this a cohabitation agreement, and with a property, it's linked to a document we call a declaration of trust.
Right, okay.
You don't need to know about the names. That's what we deal with and what goes in them. But essentially, these are documents that say, look, we hope we won't ever need it. But if there is a separation, this is what's going to happen.
Yeah, and you have the evidence, right? Yeah.
You have the evidence, because...
Okay.
And you touch on evidence, and that's really important because the law in this area is really complex. If there's a dispute, it can take a lot of time and a lot of money to sort out. So let's get rid of the need for going down that route and just get something in place that determines what's going to happen.
So what we're talking about is a situation where a couple have lived together for a number of years and then something goes wrong. And we're now talking about what happens after that goes wrong. So in terms of, I'm just looking at my notes here, you talked about the law being really complex in this area. But I guess it's, and the financial implications and the time implications, but I guess really there's a lot of emotion in this as well.
A lot of emotion, yeah. And that applies across the board, whether you're married or not. Everyone knows that when you go through a breakup, you've got the emotional side of the actual breakup, and then you've got all these worries about what's going to happen to me financially, etc.
Yeah.
And to be able to give some peace of mind, or to get some peace of mind, by just saying, look, again, hope all goes well, but we know that it doesn't always. That I know I'm going to be okay, and without some sort of firm document saying this is what's going to happen to all the assets in the property, we go down to looking at how you own the property and what evidence there is on top of that to say what share you should get. That's a very broad generalisation. And you can imagine then from that point how complex it gets.
Sure. So then when you're purchasing a property and if you're not married, what should you be doing at that point when you purchase a property?
If you purchase a property, absolutely. You should be getting early advice. You should be getting early advice about, well, actually, we want to live together. And this is, again, both hope that there'll be no separation, but if it does, this is what we want to happen. So you need to speak to a family lawyer. You need to make sure the instructions you give the solicitor that's doing the work to do with the purchase of the house, make sure you give them clear instructions about how you want to own the house. But see a family lawyer, get that cohabitation agreement.
That's interesting because I don't know that anyone would really naturally think of talking to a family lawyer at that point.
No.
I think there may be an assumption that that's something that either can be dealt with later or that it's part of the process of buying the house. Really interesting that they need to get advice at that point from someone like yourself.
And I know it can sound really unromantic to do so.
Yeah. I can imagine it's the last thing that people want to talk about.
It really is. It is the best way to ensure security. Yeah. And now, in the era we're in now, sort of bank of mum and dad, as it's called, is like you might assume you get that money back. If you've put in more, you might assume you get back more.
You don't get it back.
It's not guaranteed. It depends on how you said you own the property and evidence after that might show that you intend to own it equally or different shares. So if you're not married and you're cohabiting, the best thing is just don't make assumptions about what you'll get, because the law is so complex you might be wrong. So go and get some advice. Understand what your position is. And it's we're not necessarily talking about disputes here when you're getting together. It just might be that you both have one understanding of what will happen.
Yes.
And the law doesn't say that.
No. And it's also a way of recording, I guess, amicable decisions. So it's not just something that might be contentious, something that you're in disagreement about, but something that you agree on. And actually,
absolutely.
It's perhaps having that evidence just there as a reassurance to you and your relationship too.
Absolutely.
It can be a positive thing.
It really can be. And especially when you both intend something to happen, I think we can appreciate that when you're at the point of separation, things might not be so amicable. And if they're not amicable, you're going to need to rely on what the law says, what your evidence says.
Absolutely.
So the best thing is talk together. What do we want to happen in the event something were to happen to this relationship? And go and see a family law and get that recorded properly.
So I get there's probably a lot of people out there that are thinking, I haven't done this. So if you haven't done it at the outset of these types of situations, buying a house or whatever it is it too late to go back and make a cohabitation agreement, as you say?
You can get these documents in place and enter into an agreement at any time. You could have been together 1 year. You could have been together for 20 years. It doesn't matter. We can do it at any time.
That's brilliant. And so as things change in your relationship, in your world, if you have children, what's the advice in those situations? Should you revise your agreement if you've got one in place?
Yes, is the short answer. For a moment, talking about people that don't have children, you might have an agreement about what's happening to your assets and to your property, but your financial positions might change. You might get an inheritance that you use to pay off the mortgage. anything can happen. Have a chat. Does the agreement that we entered into still reflect what we want to happen? Or actually, do we need to revisit that? We advise that you do review it as your life goes on.
Yeah.
And now, if you do have children,
yes,
there is because that is most people's worry, is that we're not married. I hear what you're saying about, we're looking at how much I'm entitled to from the property. In the podcast we did about divorce, I spoke to you about what the courts can do when people are married, and they can make sure needs are covered and they can consider fairness. That's not talked about here.
Right.
Because we don't have laws that apply specifically to a relationship when you're cohabitees, the court aren't looking at what's fair and what's needed by either party. So this is where there had to be action taken, some time ago, about what do you do if I'm not going to be able to afford to look after these kids. One question I quite often get that I'd like to put people's minds at rest about is, does that mean I'll lose my kid? And it's no, the courts don't make decision about whether or not the kids live with you, about your monetary situation. Okay, so that's what I would just like to reassure everybody, because that is a common question.
Okay, so they don't base the decision based on money, is that what you're saying?
So I know that we're going to sit down and talk in a lot of detail about what happens with children on separation. But when it comes to cohabitees, that's a question I get regularly in the meetings is, oh gosh, if I don't have enough money, will I lose my kid? The answer is no. That's not a reason to remove a child.
Right, okay.
So just set people's minds at rest there, because you'd be surprised at how often.
Well, no, I can imagine it's the most important one. But
absolutely.
I can appreciate that. Yeah.
So the law that I talked about before, about getting a cohabitation agreement, about saying, well, what share of the house belongs to me? Your share might not be enough to help you look after your kids.
Right.
So there is another set of laws that say, if you've got kids, you can ask for a bit more. So and not available in all circumstances, but in some circumstances, you might be able to say, actually, I need to have a bit more money to buy a house. The important thing is that doesn't become yours.
Sorry, what doesn't become yours?
That extra money you need. You might be entitled to £500,000 from a property, but you need 600 to buy one.
Right.
You might get given an extra £100,000. Once the kids are adult, that goes back to your ex-partner.
Oh, right. So it's almost like a loan.
Yeah. It's like you temporarily have that money.
Right. Okay.
I've seen a couple that have been together 30 years. One of them, when they came out of that, had no automatic right to anything because of the way that they had set up their circumstances. 30 years, children. And you'd think that would give you something, and it didn't in that case. Gosh. And actually, just by actually being a bit of a nuisance, I managed to secure them a lump sum.
Wow.
But you don't want to be relying on that.
No.
From my point of view, I can see just how unfair it can be.
Right. Okay. That's
so that's why I really, the thing I would say to take away is there's something you can do about it. You can get that agreement in place whilst things are still good. Hopefully you'll never need it, but if you do, it's there.
Yeah. It's like an insurance policy, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Janet, you mentioned this couple that had been together for a long time and they didn't have a cohabitation agreement in place. Can you think of any other scenarios that you've come across that our viewers would be interested to hear?
Talking generally, because of course all our clients' information and details are entirely confidential.
Of course.
And actually something I see happen more than once is where parents have provided the deposit,
Oh, yes.
thinking that they're giving money to their child, and perhaps they might want their child to keep that if there's a separation, and that doesn't end up happening.
Mm-hmm.
And in one particular scenario, they'd actually got some form of agreement. It wasn't quite what I would want them to have in place.
Sure.
Then they'd moved house and moved house and moved house, and their circumstances had changed so much that that initial sort of bit of paper that they'd drawn up just didn't apply at all.
Gosh, wow.
So again, mum and dad in that situation found out that the money they had gifted, it wasn't protected for their child. That happens more than
I can
perhaps
imagine
more than
a
you
lot.
might think.
No, I can imagine a lot.
Mm.
Yes, and actually, I imagine that's not just a worry for the child, but also the parents.
Yeah, absolutely.
So if I was a parent and I wanted to give my child some money as a deposit for a property, and they were in a relationship, not married, what does that mean, and what do I need to consider?
So that is a scenario that I see quite commonly. And I think it's quite common knowledge now that mum and dad are having to help children out more and more to get on the property ladder. You will expect that when you're giving that money to your child, that they will always keep that. Mm-hmm. Don't assume that that money will come back to them if they don't have a cohabitation agreement in place saying that is what is going to happen.
Right. Gosh, that's really important.
Yeah, and I've seen on multiple occasions where parents have gifted money, expecting their child will always keep it, and that hasn't happened. So do encourage your child to obtain a cohabitation agreement if that's what you want to happen.
Absolutely.
Mm.
It's really putting something in place to manage expectations as well.
Yeah, and it all comes back to what is it that you and your partner and your parents, if they've given you money, want to happen to the money, and make sure you've got the agreement that ensures that's what's going to happen.
Finally, Janet, what's the most helpful piece of advice that you would give someone in this situation?
The piece of advice I would give is to have conversations with your partner early on, preferably before you start cohabiting, and with any family that are giving money. What does everyone think is going to happen? I would then say, go and see a solicitor. You won't know all the risks and pitfalls. A solicitor does. Mm-hmm. So go and speak to a solicitor to talk about getting that cohabitation agreement, getting that declaration of trust that will make sure that what you want to happen is what happens. And from that point, keep it under review.
Well, thank you, Janet. That was really helpful, and hopefully our viewers found it equally helpful. We'll look forward to seeing you next time.